my burnout season was really, really, really painful. I didn't know if I was ever going to be able to come back from it. But I can tell you that the life I've built since then is more beautiful than the life that I had before. Because even though I was achieving a lot of things, getting a lot of things done, and was getting the accolades, and felt like a really high achiever, and all of the things that went with that, the internal relationship that I had with myself over that season was a nightmare. The way I felt about myself, the imposter syndrome that I was still carrying, the unhealed trauma and the shame that went with that was still a part of my life, all of that was driving all of those externals, all of that was present with me in those quote-unquote good times of my high achievement. But now, in the space that I'm in now, I'm still achieving, I'm still doing the things that I want to do, but I don't have that voice. I'm not carrying that sense of having a broken relationship with myself. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Permission to Love podcast. I'm your host, Jerry Henderson. This podcast is dedicated to helping you have a healthier relationship with yourself. And we're doing that by identifying the limiting beliefs that we hold about ourselves and learning to let go of them. We're learning to discover the truth about ourselves, that we are worthy of love, that we can accept ourselves, and the things that we desire in our lives, we can have them, and we're worthy to have them. So for those of you who are new to this podcast, I'm a master certified transformational life coach, and I've helped thousands of people have a healthier relationship with themselves. And so I want to say thank you for being here, and thank you for investing in yourself by listening to this podcast. Now today we're going to continue our series on burnout. We're going to talk today about how do you overcome or how do you recover from it. Last week we talked about how to avoid it, to understand the warning signs that you're headed towards it and what to do about it. But if you are in burnout, if you're experiencing it, I want to let you know you can overcome it. I know it may feel like you can't. I know it may feel like a hopeless situation. It did for me, certainly. And it does often for people who come to me for coaching in this space. They feel really lost. They don't know what to do or where to go, and they don't know if they'll ever get back to being their normal self. But I do want to encourage you, it is possible to heal from burnout. I'm a testimony of that, and the other people I've seen and worked with, they're a testimony of that as well. So you can change, you can transform, and today I hope this episode's going to help you. So let's just do a little bit of a review from the last episode. What is burnout? Well, burnout is a holistic exhaustion. That's the way I like to say it. It's physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. It's just like you have seemed to almost flatline in every area of your life. And this exhaustion is brought on by long-term sustained stress in our life that just continues to stay with us. And we're not finding healthy ways to cope with it, or we're not removing those stressors. Because if you're a high achiever, the more stressors you have, sometimes the more motivated you are. And then what happens is life feels unmanageable and you feel like you can't recover from it no matter how much rest you get, because recovering from burnout isn't just about getting rest. It's about a holistic approach. And we're going to talk about that here in just a little bit. So if you've been trying to rest and take vacations and have time off, but you still can't recover from the burnout, there's a real reason why, and we'll talk about that. Now here's something that's really important to understand. Everybody, every single person on this planet can suffer from burnout. And one of the challenges with high achievers is you almost think that you're immune to burnout because you have such a high capacity to do things, to get things done, right? To check off those lists, do those projects. And all of that can make you think that you're immune to burnout. But listen, you have the same anatomy, the same nervous system as every other person on this planet. And yes, while your motivations and those intrinsic values that are driving you to achieve might be different than other people, your system is still the same. It's a human system. And so if you push it too hard and you maintain a level of stress that's too much, you're going to burn out. And so that's the real danger point for high achievers is we think, one, that we're never going to burn out because we're built different. And then that gets into some, arrogance that sometimes a high achiever can carry. And then number two, we think that we should recover quicker from burnout than other people because we're high achievers in the way that we're wired. And why can't I carry the same level of work that I used to right now? And I feel like I can't get motivated. And all of that language and all of that narrative starts to happen happen in our minds, but those are two real danger points for a high achiever. One, that you think you're immune to burnout, and two, you think that you're going to recover quicker than anybody else. But all that's going to do is it's going to set you up for failure. It's going to set you up to repeat the pattern of burnout because nothing is actually changing. And in order for you to heal from burnout, things have to change, and they have to change deep inside. It's not just about rearranging the chairs on the Titanic, okay? It's about making some very clear and real internal changes. So let's talk about a couple of different levels of burnout, okay? So we have these stressors that are happening in our life. It's work, it's all the things that we're doing, it's family, it's everything that we've taken on in order to achieve. And if you'll go back and listen to the last episode, I talked about the formula for burnout, which is our need for acceptance being greater than our capacity. That's going to equal burnout because there's some motivator inside of us that's allowing us to take on all of these stressors beyond what's healthy. And so understanding that driver is going to be really important. But if you're in the stage of burnout, all of that stress has led you to what is that first level of burnout. And in this stage, you can really begin to feel that stress having its impact in your life. You're not performing at the same level. You're not connected to things the same way you were before. You're not as motivated in work. You might be more cranky or critical of people around you. You're feeling more exhausted. You're not recovering as quickly as you were before, right? That 2-week or that 3-week vacation isn't doing it anymore. You might be going back to work even more exhausted after a vacation instead of feeling refreshed. You might be having feelings of emptiness and meaninglessness that are beginning to develop inside of you. And so you're noticing, right, all of these things are shifting you from where you were before. It's really critical and important at this stage to understand what's happening. You're becoming burned out. Okay? And you just need to call it for what it is. And it's not a bad thing for you to be able to say that you're getting burned out or you're in the first stage of burnout. This is your body, your brain, your emotions, your heart, your system telling you, you need to change something. It is you doing an act of love towards yourself. And you need to listen to yourself if you're at this stage. You need to see what's going on in your life and pay attention to it because most people will ignore this stage. They'll think, well, I just need to double down a little bit more. I just need that vacation, or I need to be more like present during the weekends, or whatever the story is that we start to tell ourselves. We think that we can just get away with like a few little minor adjustments, that it's not that big of a deal. It's just a season. We'll plow through it. All of that narrative is going to lead you into this next stage of burnout that we're going to talk about in a second. But if you're in that space, you need to make some changes. And if you need help making those changes, you can connect with a coach. I work with people in this space. You can connect with a therapist. But whatever it is, that is the time to pay attention and make some changes. Because the next stage of burnout is chronic and habitual burnout. This stage of burnout is severe. This is where it's ingrained in your life. It's a pattern, it's a habit, it's just a part of how you're living your daily life. This is when it's affecting everything in your life, your work performance, your relationships, your overall attitude. You might be having a lot of anxiety, depression. Life at this point can seem very meaningless. And this stage and staying in this stage can lead to long-term mental, emotional, and physical challenges in your life. Now, even in this state for high achievers, you might be the only one who's really aware of what's going on with you. People still may see you getting the job done and moving forward, but inside you feel dead. You feel no motivation. You're dragging your body along and you're just going through the motions of your life. But I want to encourage you, you don't have to stay there. You can change even in that state. So let's just talk about some more of those symptoms or those signs that you're in these stages. And I'm going to really hammer these home because sometimes as high achievers or people who've dealt with trauma or other painful life experiences, we really are good at ignoring the red flags. We're really good at just pressing on. So I want to take some time and really go through these. So if you're experiencing these, get the help that you need. So we talked about some of these in the last episode. I've mentioned them a little bit here, but you get really irritable. You have a high level of irritability because of all that stress that you're carrying and your inability to re-engage. You're getting really frustrated with yourself. And that frustration, it's coming out on everybody else. People are beginning to notice and comment just how stressed out you seem to be and how annoyed and irritated you are. The second thing that might be happening is what I call your bootstraps have broken, right? You've previously been able to pick yourself up by your bootstraps, get back in the game, right? You had a fall, you didn't perform well, or you were really stressed out, but you were able to pick yourself back up and get moving again. Well, when you're burned out, your bootstraps are broken. You go down to reach for those bootstraps and there's nothing there to hold on to anymore. It feels like you'll never be able to pull yourself back up out of this hole that you're in. You feel like you want to sleep all the time, but the challenge is you're not able to sleep well, and so sleep is never actually refreshing to you. Motivation seems to be gone. It's out the window. Your ability to feel connected to things that were once important to you, that were meaningful to you, and were a source of inspiration, that seems to have left the building as well. You have a reduced level of performance. Even if you're the only one who's aware of it, you know that you're not bringing your best level of performance in the things that you're doing. You might be getting really cynical and negative towards your job or towards other people who are asking things of you. So anything that feels like it's a demand on you really begins to be an irritant and a sore point for you because you don't feel like you have anything else to give, and the slightest asks begin to feel like really big demands, which also leads into that feeling of being easily overwhelmed by any responsibilities. And where once you're able to take on so much that now any responsibility just feels like a major chore in your life, and you feel overwhelmed by it, and you even start to shut down when thinking about trying to engage in that task. You're probably finding it really hard to concentrate and to stay focused. And you're likely noticing an impact on your relationships. You might be withdrawing from friendships. You might be withdrawing from family members. You're definitely probably withdrawing from people who are at work and your job as well. You're beginning to withdraw from that. And you have a narrative probably in your head about being afraid of losing your job because in your mind you're not showing up the way that you think you should be. And so that fear is even adding more stress onto you. So those are just some of the things that are going on. But when I talk about it and what I experienced and what I hear other people say is sometimes it feels like life went from color TV to black and white TV, that everything just gets muted, that nothing seems to have the same vibrancy that it had before. That spark, that pep in your step, that energy, that connection, all of that seems to have been lost. You might feel hollow inside, and you also might feel like you have a couple of bungee cords attached to your hip, and every time that you try to push out of this thing and you start trying to move forward, or you try to do a new project or something that you think is going to bring you back, okay, you feel those bungee cords just pulling you right back down, sitting you down in the chair and keeping you from moving forward and from healing. But I want to remind you once again that all of that is your system telling you that you need to heal, that you're not okay, all right? I know that you always want to be okay. You want to be able to be in a state where nothing can faze you, that you can just do anything. You're Superman, you're Superwoman, but you're a human being who has certain limitations. And life at this point is inviting you to shift away from having all of your identity and your focus on getting things done and doing and accomplishing. And it's inviting you to shift your focus into being and finding meaning and beauty in who you are just as a human, and connecting with relationships around just the relationship instead of the achievement or the thing that that relationship might do for you. So life is inviting you at this stage to rewire everything. It's giving you a chance at a more beautiful, life-giving, and incredible life. This is your invitation. So don't dismiss it as the fact that you've just not been able to handle things like other people are able to handle them. Because once again, it's not about the amount of work. It's about the motivators behind the work. So it's not about that. It's about you having a beautiful opportunity to approach life in a different way. And when I say all of that, I'll have to admit that my burnout season was really, really, really painful. I didn't know if I was ever going to be able to come back from it. But I can tell you that the life I've built since then is more beautiful than the life that I had before. Because even though I was achieving a lot of things, getting a lot of things done, and was getting the accolades, and felt like a really high achiever, and all of the things that went with that, the internal relationship that I had with myself over that season was a nightmare. The way I felt about myself, the imposter syndrome that I was still carrying, the unhealed trauma and the shame that went with that was still a part of my life, all of that was driving all of those externals, all of that was present with me in those quote unquote good times of my high achievement. But now, in the space that I'm in now, I'm still achieving, I'm still doing the things that I want to do, but I don't have that voice. I'm not carrying that sense of having a broken relationship with myself. I'm not living in the space of self-loathing or feeling like I've got to overcome who I am. And the way that I overcome that is through all of these achievements and activities. And so there is a more beautiful life on the other side of achievement that's motivated by proving and then moving into living a life that's coming from a place of being, of not having to prove, of just accepting yourself as you are, learning to love yourself as you are, and letting all of the things that you want to create in this life flow from that space. And when it flows from that place, it's a much more beautiful creation from you, and it's a much more beautiful creation that we offer to this world. Okay, so let's start talking about how do we recover from burnout. Now, there is no magic formula. Every person is different, but some of these principles are going to help you. The first thing to realize is that it's going to take time. And this is really hard for high achievers. This is really hard for people who are in burnout because the pace that you've been running at is what got you in burnout. All of those stressors, right? And some of us get addicted to stressors. We like that feeling of being overwhelmed because it keeps us motivated. We like having more to do than we can get done because that somehow motivates us and drives us. And part of that's okay, but the challenge is for a high achiever or a person who's in a state of burnout or a person who's trying to overcome the message that there's something wrong with them, allowing time to happen, to heal, is very difficult. Because listen, it didn't happen overnight, and it's not going to get fixed overnight. And it's important to accept that. Because if you try to rush this process of healing from burnout, you're just going to make the burnout worse. You're just going to prolong it. You're just going to stay in it longer. And when you come out of it, you're going to be more likely to repeat the patterns that are going to get you back into burnout. This is a season that you've been invited into of intentional rest. And we talked about intentional rest in the last episode, but you've been invited to intentionally rest. And there are strategies that you can build that can help you rest and have that rest be refreshing, okay? Now, I know in your mind, you're probably thinking, okay, I know it's going to take time, but how long? Once again, it's different for everybody. Some people it's 6 months, some people it's 12 months, some people it's years, okay? It depends on the level of burnout, how long it's been going on, and how willing you are to make the changes that are necessary that will allow you to become healthy again. And it's important for you to admit that the life that you were living and the way that you were going about it was unhealthy. It wasn't just that the boss was asking too much or life just got too busy. No, there were unhealthy patterns that were in your life. And as long as you project it externally, you won't do the deep work that's required to heal. And this is a deep work of healing because we got to get to motivators. We got to get to identity that was driving all of those things. And if you dismiss it as a season, as just some external factors, that you just weren't able to get on top of things, all of that is going to keep you from understanding how unhealthy that pattern is that you were living in. Okay? We have to take it seriously. We have to look at it for what it is. So in understanding that, you have to realize that you're worthy of taking the time that it takes for you to heal and to be patient with yourself. And yes, you're going to experience frustration in trying to heal from burnout. Yes, you want the path to accelerate. Yes, you want it to be done and over. You want your old self back. And that's what I hear a lot from people. I just want to get back to my old self. Well, I want to encourage you for a second. You don't want to get back to your old self. You want to create a new self. Because even though you have things about that old self that you liked, their ability to get things done and the motivations and all the things that were there, you also had all of those things that were driving the unhealthy behavior that we just talked about. And so what you want to do is you want to create a new self that, yes, has the beautiful parts of who that person was before you hit burnout, but also develops new things that allows the true beauty of who you are internally to be reflected in this world without all of the limiting beliefs of what you've got to do to be acceptable. So you're going to have to be patient with yourself. You deserve this season of recovery. Now, the second thing that's going to happen if we want to heal and sustain that healing for the long term is we have to create a new why for our life, right? Not just a new why for how we're going to get things done, but a new why for our life. Who do I want to be? Why do I want to be that person? How do I want my life to show up here on this earth? And why do I want it to be that way? This is really important because this is where we get into those motivators. This is where we really get into that deep sense of healing of what needs to happen inside of us to identify those drivers that were causing that unhealthy behavior. And here's what's really important to understand about developing that new why. It's about creating that new identity of who you want to be and why you want to be that person. So this is about getting in touch with our values or setting new values for our life. Because right now you might be in a space where life feels really meaningless and you're asking yourself the question, why? Why am I burned out? Why did I do all of that stuff? I pushed myself to the edge. I almost self-destructed. Why? What was it all for? What was the purpose of all of it? And if I did all of that only to wind up here, I mean, what's the meaning of life? Why am I even pushing myself? Why am I even here? Like, what is it all for? And that might have you in a space of feeling very purposeless and without direction. And getting to a new sense of why is really important for you. And this is going to be about work of healing. This is going to be about work of understanding those limiting beliefs that are inside of you that are driving that. It's going to be about getting rid of that voice that there's something wrong with you. And the only way that you can show that there's not something wrong with you is by achieving and by doing things. And so it's going to be about getting a hold of all of that and creating a new why for your life, the new meaning, the new purpose, the type of person that you want to be. This is the space where true healing starts to happen. And it's why just going on a vacation isn't helping, right? It's why trying to just rearrange some of your life and your priorities isn't helping with the burnout, because there's something intrinsically inside of you that needs to be healed. Because getting that space healed is what's going to provide you the energy, right? Because you're going to come from a place of wholeness. I like to think about it like this. At one point before burnout, a lot of people feel like they had like a recharging battery inside of themselves, right? The work itself, the things they were engaging in, it was recharging their battery, and that meaning was keeping them going. But then all of a sudden, they started to switch to feeling like every night they had to plug that battery into the wall. And then when you're in that full-blown burnout, even plugging yourself into the wall doesn't do it anymore. The battery is dead. The cells of it feel dead. And no matter what you do, it feels like it can't come back alive. So this work of understanding our why is about going in there and fixing the battery. What actually charges it? What actually causes it to come back to life? And then it becomes, once again, it's self-sustaining, its own energizing battery, because your why is now the thing that's keeping that thing operated. I hope that makes sense, and I hope that's an analogy that can serve you. And it's helped a lot of people to look at it that way, that it's about doing that healing internally to fix those core motivators and that core why. Now, the next thing that's going to be important is self-care. I talk about that a lot in this podcast, learning to love yourself, learning to accept yourself, learning to give yourself space, getting the appropriate amount of rest. And if you need to go to a doctor to figure out how to get your sleep patterns right, that's important to do, because you're going to need appropriate rest in order to recover from burnout. And I want to point out, it's not just about the physical rest and self-care, it's about the holistic self-care. Your mental, emotional, spiritual, physical, all of it being cared for in a loving way. That means not beating yourself up for being burned out. It means not pushing yourself beyond your boundaries right now. It means allowing yourself to not have certain relationships in your life that are draining and depleting for you. It means incorporating whatever spiritual practices might work for you to help you in this time. So prioritizing self-care is going to be really important. And if you need some help with knowing how to do that, there's loads of episodes in this podcast about self-care and how to go about that. Now, the next thing is you're going to have to develop new patterns, new behaviors, because the old behaviors, the old patterns have got you where you're at. So what does that look like for you? Okay, you'll have to take some time to really evaluate that. Are you in unhealthy patterns right now? Are you not taking care of your sleep? You're getting 4 hours, or you're not getting exercise, or you're doom scrolling, or you're spending too much time in front of a screen, or you're not getting outside enough. Whatever it is that's an unhealthy pattern or behavior for you. You might be saying yes to people too much. You might not be in a rhythm that really helps you sustain a good and healthy routine. Whatever those things are, you're going to have to take a look at it, evaluate it, and say, what patterns, what behaviors do I need to incorporate in my daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and annual schedule that allow me to recover? And when you're in burnout, those are not the same patterns and behaviors that you had before. They're different ones, and they're strategic around what's going to get you healed, what's going to get you healthy, and get you into a place where these habits can be ingrained in your life so that you can take them forward as you heal. After you begin to emerge out of burnout, you'll have these things that you can take with you for a lifetime. Now, the next thing that I think is really important for people who are recovering from burnout is to get a mindfulness practice. And when I say mindfulness, I'm not talking about becoming a yogi. I'm not talking about hours and hours of meditation. I'm talking about practicing being present, finding ways to reduce your stressors. And yes, meditation can be a beautiful part of that practice. So can gratitude. So can just taking a mindful walk where you're observing and being very present as you take the walk. Because what this is doing is it's helping to heal your nervous system. And mindfulness for me has been one of the most effective ways to help heal my nervous system, because it pulls me out of the future, the doom, what's happening, oh my gosh, I may never get out of this, and what's going to happen to me if I don't perform at this level, etc., etc. And it gets me out of the past of thinking about, why did I do that? Why did I live my life that way? So all of those things of future projecting and past regrets are keeping your nervous system wired and fried. So the act of mindfulness can bring you to a place that's more peaceful and that can allow you to get a different perspective, okay? Because your perspective has been so much on achieving and getting somewhere. Mindfulness brings you to this present moment and allows you to appreciate what's happening right now. One of the people I was working with had a real breakthrough moment when they realized that their entire life they were chasing achievements. Goals were always in front of them, and they felt like they were always running towards them. But when they were forced to change their life, to change their patterns because of the burnout that they found themselves in, they realized that they had been missing their entire life. They had been chasing achievements and goals, and they were missing everything that was going on around them. And one of the key things in healing from burnout is learning to appreciate the little things, because that's going to allow you to see all the beauty that's around you. It's going to allow you to appreciate what's here instead of always trying to get there. It's going to allow you to find meaning in just life itself, and that's going to bring you energy. That in itself is going to start to heal you. When you watch a sunset, or you see your child do something, or your spouse do something, or you're in nature and you're really present, and you start to really appreciate and notice the little things, as we call them, which are actually the big things, all of that can begin to feed your soul. All of that can begin to bring healing, because you're no longer distracted with something way out there in the future or trying to get out of burnout. You're in the middle of enjoying what life is, the present moment. Life is here and now. Be here now and let the present moment begin to bring healing to you. And mindfulness is really an effective way to have that happen. Now, the next thing I'll talk about is setting boundaries. You need to set healthy boundaries in your life, because a lot of us find ourselves in burnout because we didn't set healthy boundaries. So learning to set boundaries, and start with the small things, okay? If boundary setting feels really overwhelming to you, start with the small things. You can also go listen to the episode I did on the ABCs of boundaries, how to set them, keep them, etc. And so it's really important that you set boundaries. And in setting those boundaries, it's also important to set some warning signs, okay? Because sometimes we have boundaries, but we just let people violate them, or we're violating them all the time. So I want you to think about it almost as a perimeter that you're setting around your healing process. And any perimeter that has an alarm attached to it will go off, right, when somebody violates that perimeter or crosses that boundary. We need the same thing in our lives. Because we can wind up letting everybody violate our boundaries. We'll violate our own commitments and boundaries to ourselves, but we don't recognize the warning signs. And so whatever those warning signs are for you, when you begin to get more irritable, or you've said yes more than you should, or you broke your promise to yourself, whatever those warning signs are, get those listed out, because that's going to help you begin to see, oh my goodness, I'm allowing my boundaries to get violated. And when my boundaries get violated, I take on too much, I get too stressed out, and you'll cycle back into the same patterns and the same behaviors that have you in the current situation that you're in right now. Now, the final thing I'm going to mention is don't be afraid to get help if you need it. A lot of times people who are experiencing burnout have shame attached to it. They feel like they should have been able to handle this. And the fact that they haven't been able to handle it has a certain level of shame attached to it. There is no shame in burnout. Okay, it happens. It happens to so many of us. So I'd encourage you, if you need help, do not let shame, embarrassment, or feeling like a failure, or whatever the narrative or the story that you have going on in your head, don't let that keep you from getting help. Because if you need help to get out of burnout, welcome to the club. All of us need help getting out of burnout, because there's patterns and belief systems that got us into burnout that we weren't aware of, that were driving our behaviors that got us there. We need somebody to help us see those, to identify those. And that's the kind of help I'm talking about, right? And it's a holistic type of help. It may be a physician that helps you with getting sleep. It might be a coach to understand limiting beliefs. I mean, there's all kinds of things that you can get that will help you recover and build and create the life that you want. A new life that is happier, healthier, more sustainable, and it is grounded in self-acceptance and self-compassion. I do want to mention, like I mentioned in the last episode, if you need help in this journey of healing from burnout or preventing yourself from getting into burnout, I do a lot of coaching in this area. And if you want more information, you can simply see the link in the show notes of this episode, or you can go to my website at jerryhenderson.org. And I am offering $1,000 off right now of my coaching package of recovering from burnout for the listeners of this podcast. So when you go to my website, you can set up a free consultation call. And when we get on that call, just mention that you heard on this podcast episode about the $1,000 discount, and we'll apply that discount and get you started on your path of healing. And once again, don't let the excuses in your mind keep you from getting the help that you need. Now, if you've not had a chance yet to subscribe or to follow this podcast, I want to encourage you to do that, as well as turn on those reminders, because that's going to keep you updated when new episodes are coming out. And also, if you've not had a chance yet to rate it or review it, take a moment to do that, because that's really going to help continue to expand the reach of this podcast to other people who need help about learning how to heal their relationship with themselves. And also, if you know somebody who's in burnout or headed towards burnout, send them this episode. You never know the impact that it's going to have in their life. Well, thank you for joining another episode of the Permission to Love podcast. So grateful that you're here as always. And if you have things that you want to share with me, if they're feedback or questions that you have, you can send me an email at jerry@jerryhenderson.org. I'd love to hear from you. Or you can send me a DM on Instagram. My handle there is Jerry A. Henderson. And finally, I want to remind you as always, you are worthy of your own love.